On mute then, and you can wing it.
Okay, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the RationalInvestor.com's Daily Brief Recap. Actually, Kevin and I, you just heard him there a second ago. We're kind of musing about how there really isn't a heck of a lot new going on. Market being driven, if you will, today. So, in a weird sort of way, I think, just to make our jobs a little easier, I'm actually just going to talk to you off of the chart that I put together yesterday. Conversations really haven't changed about US dollar index. We carved out a daily inside bar there yesterday. And actually, that was, beg your pardon, that was the day before yesterday. So, sort of stopping that massive slide that we saw the US dollar. And, we know that the euro makes up a big chunk of this US dollar index. So, its bottom and its little double bottom rally here. It's almost the exact inverse of what you see out of the US dollar index. So it actually went and fractaled out 2 days ago. But interestingly, I'm hearing more talk about, oh, well, Brexit isn't actually done and there's more votes that have to be happening. So I wonder whether a bit of that pullback has to do with that. But also, too, today we had an ECB meeting. And gee whiz, what a surprise. They announced that they were not going to do anything on interest rates and they're going to continue their aggressive monetary easing policy, quantitative easing, etc. I think probably the biggest thing that's going on here, though, which is really interesting, and if anything, it makes perfect sense to me, is this is the end of Draghi's tenure. Today was his last sort of public hurrah. And we're actually heading into a new era of monetary policy out of Europe in that this Lagarde person is going to be taking over the job. She's not an economist. She's not really a central banker per se. And she has publicly said that she will explore various new ideas to try and stimulate the European economy. So get ready, folks. And I wonder, and we've sort of been talking about this recently, I wonder whether this was just sort of backing up, clean up all the oversold conditions, see if they can run out as many shorts as possible for actually the real dump coming down the pike. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And probably we could start getting overtly bearish again as soon as we start losing like these kind of trend lines here. And you can see, boom, we've come right back to it. Now, as we've always said, time and time again, never really a good idea to take a trade at a trend line. If anything, we want to let the market slip through here, put in some structure, and then start to tank. So we'll be watching for that. And that's sort of the same kind of conversation about US dollar from the other perspective. And also, too, what I'm also seeing is to a certain degree, if this US dollar index is going down, to a certain degree, it is a risk on bet. In essence, people taking their money out of T-bills, putting it back into Europe, buying stocks, whatever. The fact that we have this inside bar and we're starting to work our way back up means to me maybe fear has come back into the market a little bit. Do we see that in our sort of risk on, risk off kind of conversation? To a certain degree, we do. You see bonds, yen, and this is really interesting. I talked about this in the daily brief today. If yen can actually put in a W with an M inside of it, super, super bullish reversal. But right now, yen's enjoying a little bit of a rally, but it's got to break this M. You can see that the gold is just taking off like a rocket here, which is really interesting because it's the only one out of these three that's actually flashed that overt bullish sign. And Thursdays on TRI, we do the baby powder report. Julian checks in from Asia. And he actually thinks that this gold rally is a little bit of a head fake, and he's actually looking to short up into sort of the 15.10, 15.20 area on the gold, which I found fascinating. Because when I look at my gold stocks and stuff, when I did sort of my commentary on the gold, I'm kind of thinking that maybe Barrick does like an inverted head and shoulders here against this neckline. Still very early in that process, but enjoying a nice up day. And we've finally come back in against key lows here and in this traffic area. So seeing a bit of back and forth makes sense. And on the big gold and silver index, we actually did what's called a Joby Gap, Doji Gap, Joby Gap, because a gentleman who used to be on the site, we named it Joby Gap. Doji gapped higher, moved through that bar, so we should see an extension move. But again, that's sort of the same thing as what Julian's sort of thinking. I like the idea of a probe up against this top of the wedge. Maybe a test of these highs, maybe even filling that gap, but then a rolling over. This isn't really the healthiest of bottoms, and of course these gaps here at some point probably want to be filled in. So it feels like risk off is actually catching a bit of a bid here today. The gold market's zipping up, the bonds are up, the yen is up, and then we go and look over in the market, and I'd sort of mentioned this yesterday, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to use yesterday's chart, was that I'd sort of thought that the oil market needed a rally. It needed to move up here. The risk on proxies, things like the stocks, they had rallied up top here. Bitcoin had actually put in a little bit of a bottom. And then, of course, I think it almost feels like Bitcoin's the ultimate leading indicator in this risk on space. Stocks are sort of middle, and oil seems to be last right now. But nonetheless, if we go back to our risk on, risk off conversation, I think that the oil has completed its anticipated up move. Of course, Bitcoin here can't really buy a friend right now, projecting much lower. And as Julian sort of said today, very little reason to be hunting longs just yet. It's going to take some time for this thing to calm down and give us some sort of range to work with. And it's also interesting too, sort of final piece, the stocks are just waffling up here against their old highs. Having a really, really hard time gaining any real traction on a breakout to the upside. We talked about this at length in the daily brief and on the site. This is a really, really stiff resistance level on the S&P, so it really doesn't surprise me. And we've been talking lots about this recently. This gap here on the SPY needed to be filled in. We've been also talking a little bit about taking short shots against the top end of this range. I wouldn't be surprised if the New York boys have to do a little bit of an FU against this high. So if you are going to take that short shot, I'd give yourself a little bit of wiggle room against these highs. But nonetheless, you can see they opened up the market right up in that gap, and now they've backed her off a little bit. No real signs of a top, an actual fail here yet, but I think I've told you guys I actually was buying some puts here, and I went and bought another put here. So we'll see how it goes, but that's more insurance purposes than anything else. So, that sort of, finishes, completes our risk on, risk off kind of conversation. It feels like risk off is actually working its way up here, and risk on, I think the crude is done. It's had its technical bounce. You never know exactly where the exact top is here, but AB equals CDs. I'm thinking we're pretty close to some sort of upside pivot here. And as I said, stocks are just sort of floundering right up at the top end of the range. Crypto, again, one of the reasons why I sort of put the same chart deck that I had on yesterday. Not a heck of a lot of change here. In that, of course, we had our big break in the corn yesterday. So we've been waiting for these levels forever. So it really shouldn't surprise anybody that it's finally happened. Was interesting. Somebody on the YouTube channel had asked me, well, Brian, couldn't you do an AB equals CD going to the downside? And the answer is yes. To actually see that AB equals CD, though, you do have to change your chart to a log chart. And then you have to sort of eyeball these levels because TradingView doesn't really let you do these AB equals CDs on log charts. It gets all screwy. So, but, very simply put, if we do completely collapse here, there is the very realistic possibility we have to head down to sort of this 2,500 area here on Bitcoin, or basically play against this previous support level. It's totally realistic. I mean, anything can happen in the market. The only caveat I have to this sort of thinking is I think it would be sort of blowing this whole sort of cost of production kind of conversation out. And, I mean, maybe a statewide sponsor comes out and says, we will subsidize all electricity costs for your Bitcoin mining. What does that do to the cost of production? Maybe that drops it dramatically. I don't know. But any way you shake it, like we said about Julian here, with this recent weekly loss of these lows, we're just in hurry up and do nothing mode. And now, just in the short term, I have an AB equals CD that paints down into sort of the 5,500 area. And as well, Julian had a whole bunch of technical targets down in that area too. So I really like it when Julian and our levels start agreeing. So, maybe we have like short-term counter trend rallies back into resistance. You can see our trending signal here is basically on the cusp of giving us a bear trending signal. Maybe this is like the gold where we carve out a head and shoulders here, inverted. And these are the actual lows, but that's going to be weeks away before we can start declaring any kind of bullishness off this weekly chart. So, still a big hurry up and do nothing. And like I said, that's one reason why I didn't really change the chart deck here too much, because the conversation really hasn't changed a heck of a lot. I'll finish off with just a quick look at altcoin land. I do like the idea of using this BNB as sort of a proxy on the sort of the health of the altcoin market. And you can see the W that they did put in here, nice rally off the lows. You can also see though too, just like Bitcoin, we did M out here and fail. But unlike Bitcoin, this thing has not gone to new lows. And it was, it was really interesting looking at the price action here. And I've sort of been tweeting out these charts and stuff. I definitely think that the altcoins, they've been washed out. It's not a hell of a lot more selling to go. If you didn't sell off the top, then you basically missed the selling window. So I do find it interesting that, even though Bitcoin did break to new lows, you can see BNB didn't. And if there is still some interest in this altcoin space, if people think that there's some sort of value here, then we would actually expect to see some sort of bottom come in. Fascinating how Mountain Man, doink, original market structure, breakout level, doink, and now we're trying to paint some sort of inside bar off of the top of these channels here and the bottom of this trend line here. So let's keep an eye on how good old BNB does. And, ironically enough, we paint a nice little inside bar here. Then I could actually expect to see some sort of counter trend rally out of altcoins and BNB kind of names going forward. And I suppose to finish off our conversation here today, good old Doge. Shane's got his birthday coming up on Saturday, so we're all getting ready for that. This is Doge versus US dollars. I've been talking to you guys lots about Doge versus Bitcoin. And I really like the idea of 50% GAN levels coming back up to this 66 level. They've got their big Dogecoin coming up this summer. They basically took last summer off. So I wouldn't be surprised if they want to see this thing up for that event. And if you are interested, I do like the idea of working bids down in reload zones here. And if we look at it versus US dollar, interestingly enough, we're basically sitting in what I would consider a bottoming zone. And Kevin was telling me there's lots of listing of, Doge futures and Doge on, what did you, I don't know, if you want to just look into it, there's lots going on in the Doge world. And so you can see reload zones, you can see double bottoms, you could even argue versus US dollar that Doge is actually coming right back down again into a sexy little trade location here. Nice little dip overnight for anybody who is really slick to grab some off of Mountain Man. You can see the cheeky little gaps down here. Beautiful level here if you're going to work a bid right down there. So I'll leave you with that thought. We've talked lots about Doge versus BTC. Here is Doge versus USD, and hopefully you get the impression. I kind of like the Doge down here. Not a bad, fun crypto proxy name in this very, very tough altcoin market. Okay, everybody, I think I'll leave it at that. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. You got some value out of it. All the best, and bye for now.